this sort of test, Moose, and the Mets barely passed. I mean, they beat a team that has traded away some of the most impactful players, so they won a game that they're supposed to win. And Luis Rojas called it one of the biggest wins of the season. Seriously, and I actually can see where he's coming from because they had lost 4 straight. They're coming into a game where they are already trailing 3-1 before it was suspended by rain. The general manager said the team's been playing mediocre baseball all season long, and lately it's gotten so unacceptably bad they would kill just to be mediocre right now. And he blamed the players for not buying into their sports science and the sports performance, saying it had nothing to do with the folks behind the scenes, but it was compliance issues and the players weren't buying in. So according to Andy Martino, as I was reading this morning, Moose on SNY.TV, that ruffled some feathers in the clubhouse. I would expect that ruffled some feathers. I'd hope it would ruffle some feathers. He called out the whole team. And beyond that, from what I heard, that nobody in uniform, not just the players, Moose, but the manager and the coaches had no idea that the general manager was about to put the entire team on blast. So first off, where's the communication there? But secondly, I mean, of course you would expect that there'd be some bad feelings. Now, to their credit, the Mets went out and won a game. They actually scored some runs. They got some major help from a Nationals bullpen that is struggling. But if yesterday was a test for the Mets, they passed with a 65. Barely.
Yeah, but they passed, right? So you got to win a baseball game, and the Mets won a baseball game yesterday afternoon. They come back from 4-1 down. They win. They beat the Nats 8-7. We know how difficult the road's going to get against the Giants and the Dodgers. So I'm not going to tell you it's the prettiest thing in the world. It wasn't, but you need to win a baseball game. And it was a meaningful game for Luis Rojas and for his entire Met team. You know, after what Zach Scott had to say, but also about the way that this team has played. They played awful baseball. They've looked lifeless offensively. And, you know, on a Wednesday afternoon before the rain hit the Mets for that second game once again, and that game gets postponed, Maggie, you know what? The offense showed a little bit of life. They came back on the Nats on multiple occasions over the course of the 9 innings. They did have 13 hits as a team. They did score 8 runs. You know, I don't know if this is, I wouldn't, oversimplify things and say, wow, this is the Mets offense has now woke up and this is going to be the Mets offense that we see here from this point moving forward. But when you have a soft landing spot, and the Nats are, for everything we saw that Washington did, dismantling the team, Rizzo and company before the MLB trade deadline, or right around the MLB trade deadline, Maggie, the Mets have to win these games. I mean, they're home. You got to beat the Nats. At the very least, you got to win the series. You probably make the argument that they got to sweep Washington. You know, you want to get back to winning ways. So we'd be absolutely crucifying them if they lose that game yesterday against Washington, or say lose both games if rain didn't come into play last night. You know, we'd be saying, oh my God, I mean, this is just outright dreadful. Right. So you can't be losing to Washington. So even though it's a 65 or 70 or whatever grade you want to put on the team for their performance yesterday, it was a win. And they needed to win a baseball game. And sometimes during the regular season, there are games where you say, well, this game, even though you've got a ton of games to go, has a little bit more meaning because they've got to start to flip the script, change the narrative. And for one afternoon on a Wednesday in August, the Mets did. And
they've got the doubleheader today. Actually, we'll get you some lineups because the first game is at 12:10. But it also just seems a little bit more like beyond just, you know, they win a game last night, had to stop that 4-game skid. So that's great. And, you know, you want to feel some positivity, grasping for some positivity around this team because it's hard to find it. I would say Rich Hill volunteering to pitch yesterday, try to help out what became, you know, was basically just a bullpen game. Appreciate that from a veteran. But it just also feels like after Zach Scott came out and said what he said, and we talked a lot about this week because it's not often that a general manager really does put the team on blast in the way that he did. Just feels like some of the veneer and the shiny veneer is off this team. You know, try as hard, Pete Alonso can try as hard as he wants and can to make this seem like, you know, Mets fans, hey, we know we're going to make the playoffs. This is a special group. As Luis Rojas said, I'll never stop saying it's a special group. But it just feels like after, you know, you have the general manager, and we talked about the misstep that he did yesterday in terms of, you know, publicly airing out the players and all the things that could have been wrong there. But the fact is like, if he's right, and if the players aren't being compliant, or, you know, if there's a reason beyond like that they don't have the answers they want from the organization, it just feels like the veneer and the shiny veneer that we kind of thought this team had has been wiped off.
Yeah, to an extent. But, I mean, wasn't that veneer coming off anyway by the way that they were playing?
But this is more.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Because every team plays bad, and they've been mediocre. Zach Scott's right. It hasn't been a great season. But, like, it's one thing for the play on the field. Now that we know that there's, like, this disconnect between the team and the front office and guys aren't buying in or, maybe they don't have a reason to buy in. Now that we know there's just more discord, it's just like any kind of thought that we had about this great team chemistry or whatever, it just feels like all of that is kind of fake.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there could still be great team chemistry in that clubhouse. Doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with everything that's going on with the organization.
Yeah, but there's just not buy-in.
Well, no, and I get that, but it doesn't affect the personal relationships between the guys on the team. I mean, it might be actually a rallying cry, but I mean, winning and losing, is, I do the Sunday show with Deal during the course of the football season, right? And he talks about vitamin W kind of as the cure-all, right? So you start to win, right? So when the Yankees were kind of, kicking the tin can down the street and struggling, and you had that piece come out in the New York Post with Fishman and Company talking about the analytics department and player personnel decisions, and there hasn't been a personnel decision that he can remember that the analytics department didn't lead the way. Well, you know what? That became, and it was a huge talking point. It's still concerning with the way that the Yankees go about and run their organization and how invested they are in analytics, but they're winning now. Right. So that kind of takes a little bit of a back seat. So when you look at the Mets and you get the story of what, Scott, the airing of the public laundry, when the Mets get swept by the Phillies, when Pete Alonso is spewing the positive nonsense that he was for 2 days, whether it be at his baseball camp or whether it be after getting swept by the Phillies down in Philadelphia, Maggie, you say to yourself, okay, well, here we go. Well, the Mets and the players and the organization don't seem to be on the same page. Well, what can cure that? If they start to win games, right? So they beat Washington yesterday. Say they sweep the 2 games against the Nats today, right? Two 7-inning games in that doubleheader that gets going at 12:10 this afternoon. Well, that becomes less of a storyline if they win, right? Because all of this stuff was going on. We didn't know really about it when they were sitting in first place, right? Because they were sitting in first place.
But they were still not playing good baseball.
They were playing, right. They were sitting there in first. They were over 500. They had the lead. Nobody was coming to get them. They got Javier Baez at the trade deadline. Met fans were rejoicing, and then they went into an absolute swoon. Lose 3 or 4 to the Marlins. Get swept by the Philadelphia Phillies. Offense looks awful. Getting ripped by Larry Bowa on the Mitch Williams podcast and the like. And you say, okay, well, here we go. Well, the win yesterday was a much-needed win for a lot of different reasons. I don't think it necessarily means that all of a sudden the players are going to buy in. There seems to be a fracturing, but I would say I'd be a little bit more concerned about the leadership in the Mets organization. And I'm also concerned about the players. I mean, is this group really good enough, as likable as they are? Because there are a lot of Met fans that look at this group and they love Dom Smith and they love Pete Alonso. To a lesser extent, they love Brandon Nimmo. A lesser extent, they, there is a care for Michael Conforto at times, right? So
it's a hell of a way to put it,
right? But there is, because we
got our
defend,
ups and downs with Conforto.
Yeah, we defend Michael Conforto, but at times we get time and time again we get calls from Met fans ripping Michael Conforto, the player. But at the end, I think for the Mets as an organization, it's the player evaluation. Is this group good enough, right? And do they have the leadership in place to sell what they're trying to sell to whoever is a part of this team, that we know the way in order to be successful?
This is what I worry about in terms of the players. Listen, could they all kind of rally together against the general manager and say, bleep this guy? Because
like Major League.
Like Major League. This is the plot of Major League. They're just not planning to move the team to Miami.
Right, have a cardboard cutout of Zach Scott,
and they take it
wearing
off.
a Speedo.
Yeah,
and they're talking about how many wins we need to get in order to win the National League East. Have Luis Rojas and playing Lou Brown and rip off a piece after each and every W. I mean, that would be great.
Well,
I'd love to see that.
Edwin Diaz is no Wild Thing, but on one read, they could all come together and end up, winning the pennant like they do in Major League. But the other read could be because Zach Scott basically said most of the guys aren't compliant, and most of the guys aren't compliant. He painted everybody with a broad brush. So if you are a guy in that clubhouse who is doing the right things, if you're doing everything the right way, if you have bought in or you are trying to be that really great team player, and then you look across the clubhouse and you see somebody who is exactly the person who Zach Scott is talking about, not hydrating, not following, through with the protocols, has been injured because of it maybe, is not being able to help the team, aren't you looking at that person and saying, "What? You're hurting us." Is the team going to come together? Like yesterday, I was wondering, why don't the Mets know why the team isn't buying in, right? Like, shouldn't they talk to the players? Why aren't you buying in? Why aren't you buying in? Now, and that is a question that I'd love to know.
Success.
I'm also wondering why, what do the players who are following the rules, quote unquote, and who are doing everything maybe the right way, what do they think about their teammates who the organization is calling out? And does that cause any kind of fracture in this clubhouse?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, shiny veneer gone.
It's a great question. I mean, I don't know that answer, but I also think there's different levels of players within that clubhouse too. So if I'm, guy 23, 24, 25 on that roster,
your opinion doesn't mean a lot.
Well, I'm buying wholeheartedly in, right? If I'm watching another guy that has been an all-star or an all-star caliber player or one of the faces of the franchise, and we really don't know. The problem with what Zach Scott had to say, it led to such open speculation about who he is talking about, and it's going to lead reporters, those around the Mets, to dig and try and find out exactly who is not compliant. But if you're that guy that is more part of that bench mob, are you going to be able to step up and point the finger at an established star on this Mets team if they're not hydrating properly? I mean, I don't know if you necessarily can. I don't know if this group is going to be fractured by that. If that's a result of what Zach Scott had to say, then that's not gonna lead to this team having a unified front here moving forward. I don't know if
Well, here's the thing, Moose. Luis Rojas would probably be the person who would have to talk to one of those star players, if it is a star, and say, hey, we need you to get on board here. But the fact that Rojas, at least from what I heard, had no idea this was coming from the general manager, he might feel a certain way about that.
Well, you might be. I mean, and that's fine. And I don't know if I'm Zach Scott, I have to tell Luis Rojas exactly what I'm going to say. I understand it probably doesn't look
you got to communicate to the manager.
I don't know if I necessarily need to, because Scott is looking at it more of as an organizational approach. He also supported Luis Rojas, didn't look at it as being a managerial issue or a leadership issue. It's more individualized when you look at it.
I know, but Rojas has got to interact with the players. He's got to, in some ways, kind of help smooth this over.
But in a way, it'll probably help his relationship with the players because he can be the intermediary. He's not seen as a guy that's the management guy. He's seen as the guy that's going to be the go-between in between management and the players. So it's a tricky road when
tough.
You look at it. If you're Luis Rojas, when you're looking at your relationships between the players and what management wants you to echo down to the players on a day in, day out basis. But back to Scott for a second. Mm-hmm. He put the chips in the middle of the table. Let's call it like it is.
Yeah.
I mean, he
called him out.
He's a guy. The team was not responding. His job might be in jeopardy. Sandy Alderson reportedly has pushed for him to have the interim GM tag removed. Steve Cohen has pushed back, said he's not ready to commit to Zach Scott already. So if you're Scott, you're sitting there. You step into a role that you weren't expecting to get after the whole Jared Porter fiasco. So you're in this role right now. You're trying to bring about fundamental change to the organization. You see the team go out there and swallow their own tongue on a road trip, and you're going to put your chips all in the middle of the table. And if this team needs to respond, to look at you as a guy that's going to be arch enemy number one, because you called out the players, but it's going to get them to respond in kind. Well, ultimately, you got this team to where they needed to go, which was the postseason.
I just don't know if you basically threw grenades at every bridge you may have had with these players, or if you don't care that you basically napalmed all these bridges.
We've all seen bad negotiations and relationships between general managers and players over a multitude of sports. Doesn't mean that the player, if they get paid, won't respond or won't play for that general manager. Not everybody has to be best of friends.
No, I get it, but that was burning a lot of bridges in one day.
Well, I get it.
Potentially.
But I look at Scott, I look at the guy saying, this is it. This is my shot. I'm going to take my shot. I'm going to swing. And I'm going to see if I can wake this team up, because they look like an absolutely lost team right now. So if it takes me calling them out and saying this is not good enough, you're not buying in, I don't care if it offends you. If it gets you to play better, that's my job.
Got a lineup for you for the first game of the doubleheader. Run through it really fast. You got Brandon Nimmo leading off in center. Pete Alonso is at first. Dom Smith in left batting third. J.D. Davis at third batting cleanup. Jeff McNeil at second. Jonathan Villar at short. Michael Conforto, right field. Tomas Nido is behind the plate with Marcus Stroman on the mound. We should mention that the New York baseball lineups are brought to you by Jersey Mike's. Jersey Mike's, a sub above. So that's your lineup for Game 1 of today's doubleheader. Want to ask you, do you feel like the veneer and the shiny veneer is off the Mets a little bit? 877-337-6666. It's Moose and Maggie. Oh, by the way, we are going to check in with Brian Hoke, who covers the Yankees for MLB.com. He has written several books about the Yankees. The latest out is Bronx Zoom, which is fantastic. Brian's excellent. I love his daughter Penny maybe a little bit more, but Brian's great too. He is now driving from Newark to Iowa because his flight got canceled yesterday because of the weather.
I think he's in Indiana right now. So he's in the great state of Indiana. Left 10 o'clock last night. Tremendous.
What is this, 16 hours?
16 hours.
16 hours straight to get to the Field of Dreams. What a warrior that guy is. We're going to catch up with him on the road. Saw him drinking a Bang, the energy drink.
I think he had a couple Snickers, package of Dots. What else did he have?
Got to get some protein in there, man. This guy's going to crash and burn.
Sunflower seeds.
Not literally, but, just his energy.
Sunflower seeds. He had a lot of different things. Yeah, I mean, you got to keep powering through. I mean, I know guys that have driven straight from Florida to, Jersey, New York. So
no, we've all known people who've done that, but
16 straight hours.
Usually you're prepping yourself for a big drive like that. Mentally, you get maybe physically, you get a good night's sleep the night before. This is just like, gotta do it on a whim. I've already been at the airport for hours waiting that out, which is soul sucking. Now I got to get into a car and drive to Iowa.
It's awesome.
What a madman.
He's got the combos. He's got the seeds. But where's he spitting the seeds into is my question.
The cup.
You do? You rock the cup?
Yeah.
Maybe he rented a convertible to get him there. Maybe he's just
no, you got
right behind
there.
you.
The window is too sloppy.
Yeah.
Too sloppy.
I'll tell you what, though. Combos on a road trip, must. Yeah. Combos are amazing, too, because that package of combos could have been, put together in like 1998, and they still probably taste exactly the same.
Probably. Combo's a good snack.
It's a miracle
Pringles.
in food science.
But we'll check in with Hoke a little bit later on in the program. 877-337-6666. That is your number to call. That is your number to text. It's Moose and Maggie just getting going on this Thursday midday right here, the Fan in New York.